What's going on, everybody? Good afternoon, and I think it's time we play with the ESPN NFL Playoff Machine once again to get a feel for what we're trying to get the next few weeks. We know we want the Seahawks to win. I mean, that much I don't think I need to explain, but it's not quite that simple. And realistically, it's hard to win a lot of games in the NFL, and we may not win all our games. So what do we need to happen outside of that? The ESPN Playoff Machine does a very good job of laying that out in a very presentable way. So we're going to be playing with the Playoff Machine. Now, Week 15 is set. We know the results of all the Week 15 games, so we don't have to mess around over here. So Week 16 and on, what I've done is I've basically gone boilerplate. I've picked mostly favorites for all these games. If there was any kind of debate over a game, I just picked the home team basically. And when I say debate, I mean like mental debate in my head over who is going to win this game. That's not to say that we're going to get boilerplate results, but a lot of these games don't even matter to the Seahawks at all, or barely. So why spend time anguishing over them? Like, do we really care about Chiefs versus Texans when we're trying to figure out this playoff stuff? Almost certainly not. So let's focus in on the stuff that really matters to the Seahawks. So this current setting that I have has let's just lay out the best case scenario. The Seahawks win out. They beat the Vikings, they beat the Bears, they beat the Rams. If this happens, the Seahawks will win the division. They will get the 4 seed, even if you assume that the Rams beat the Jets this week and the Cardinals the next week. So if both teams win both their games over the next 2 weeks, then this Week 18 game will push Seattle over the top. And the Rams are left out at that point at, what would that leave them at? Yeah, 10-7. They'd be a 10-win team that gets left out in the cold. But if you flip this final result, it goes the other way. The Rams get in with 11 wins and the 4 seed. The Seahawks are left out as a 10-win team because every team that wins a wild card spot in the NFC has at least 11 wins. So you have to win this last game in all likelihood. There is a scenario where the Rams help you out by losing beforehand, but that's tough. Like, let's go back to Week 17. Let's say the Cardinals beat the Rams. Okay, now the Rams are out, but guess what? The Cardinals are in. And in this situation, you've got a 3-way tie at the top of the division. Yeah, you swept Arizona. Guess what? It doesn't matter because the 3-way tie goes Arizona's way here. Because the Rams swept us, we swept Arizona, Arizona swept LA. So just sweeping Arizona is not going to be enough. So that's only going to take you so far. Now, if you flip the results of the Jets game against the Rams, it's still not enough. Like, if the Jets beat the Rams, then, okay, great. The Rams get knocked down a little bit, but guess what? They still win the division because they swept Seattle, and it comes down to the 10-7 tiebreaker. So, in order for that to matter, you're going to need the Rams to lose to the Jets and the Cardinals. Now Seattle gets in as the 4 seed at 10-7. Because then it's a 2-way tie, and the only thing that matters is the fact that Seattle swept Arizona. So you see how unlikely it is that Seattle is going to get the help they need to win the division without beating the Rams in Week 18. It's just not very likely. So let's flip some of these back now. Let's say the Rams beat the Jets. Let's say the Rams beat the Cardinals. And then let's say Seattle beats the Rams. This is where we started. Is there any way that we could maybe drop an earlier game and still win the division? If we lose to the Vikings, Well, that flips everything all around, and it ends with, again, Seattle not getting in. They lose the tiebreaker to the Rams at 10-7. It would be, they would be tied. They would be tied at one game apiece, and it would come down to other tiebreakers, and currently the Rams would own that. So if the Vikings win this weekend, then Seattle beating the Bears and beating the Rams would not be enough. The Rams get in. That Week 18 game may not mean anything to the Rams. They might just lay down and be ready for the wild card round. Even if they win that game in this projection, they don't move up in seeding, so that game truly means nothing. So if you lose to the Vikings, you need the Rams to do something else, like maybe lose to the Cardinals. Okay, now we're talking. Now we have a situation where it's Seattle and Arizona tied at 10-7, and Seattle can win that tiebreaker. So, okay, that's a reasonable path, right? Arizona could beat LA in Week 17, absolutely. They already blew them out once this year. It can happen, but that's kind of what it's going to take. Because let's say the Jets beat the Rams, but then the Rams beat the Cardinals. Same thing, same thing. You're still getting that. Well, actually, in this case, it would be clean, right? You're getting that Seattle 10-7, and no one else in the division has 10 wins. Excuse me. So okay, I mean that works, I guess. So you need the Rams to lose one of these games, and you need it to happen in a way that doesn't get the Cardinals involved in the three-way tiebreaker, because it looks like they're going to win that tiebreaker. So you're trying to formulate all this stuff. Is there a way to lose this last game and still get in if you win your other two games? Let's say you beat the Vikings, beat the Bears, lose to the Rams. Right now, no, but let's say you give the win to the Jets. Let's say you give the win to the Cardinals. Okay, I guess this is a very unlikely path. You push the Rams down to 9 wins. You get 10 wins. Arizona gets 10 wins. You win the tiebreaker with Arizona. So there is a little bit of a backdoor here where Week 18 doesn't matter, but you are going to need the Rams to completely go to pieces these next 2 weeks. I mean, I know that Jets team has talent, but it feels like we've been saying that all year, and it hasn't really helped them win games. So there's a lot that needs to happen here, and more than likely, you're just going to have to beat the Vikings. It's hard to cook up a scenario where the Seahawks lose to the Vikings and still get in. You would need a lot of things to break your way here, and you still have to win that Week 18 get matchup, right? Like, you're going to have to win 2 of these 3 at least. And there's no guarantee 2 out of 3 is even going to be enough. But you're going to have to win 2 out of 3. Either you beat a really good Vikings team, or you go into LA and beat the Rams when you know they're going to get every call. One of the two things has to happen. You're not going to go 1-2 and expect to get in. That's unrealistic. You're not going to just beat the Bears and limp across the finish line here. You got to go crashing through that finish line some way. So, by the way, I already gave the Cardinals the win against the Niners in Week 18, and I gave the Cardinals the win this week against the Panthers. So, I guess you could get rid of the Cardinals by saying, let's say the Niners win in Week 18. Then you don't have to worry about the tiebreaker, because then Arizona's only got 9 wins. Great, but that's not really what you're worried about. Right? You don't mind getting into a tiebreaker with the Cardinals. You need to, if anything, you want to get the straight up tiebreaker with Arizona and then get out of the tiebreaker with the Rams, because you're probably going to lose that tiebreaker. Like, if Arizona only gets to 9 wins here and then the Seahawks and Rams end up in some kind of a tie one way or the other, I don't think you win that tiebreaker unless some strength of schedule stuff goes your way. So, I mean, I'm looking at this, and it's just like, yeah, if it comes down to Seattle and LA at 10 wins, LA gets in, and we don't. So, that's kind of the main stuff, right? That's kind of the main stuff we need to think about right now as Seahawks fans. The back door into the 7 seed, let's talk about that for a second here. So, let's say Seattle beats the Bears, beats the Vikings, and loses to the Rams. So the Rams win the division, and Seattle's currently left out. Washington currently has the 7 seed. So let's see if we can get them out of it. I already have them losing to Philadelphia in week 16. What if they lose to Atlanta in week 17? Well, now Atlanta's getting the 7 seed because, again, I believe this would be because you have a three-way tie, Atlanta, Seattle, Washington. Atlanta comes out on top. So we're not looking good for tiebreaker stuff. We can win some head-to-head tiebreakers against Arizona and Atlanta, but these three-way tiebreakers are not going our way. So now Atlanta's the 7 seed in this situation. Who does Atlanta play in their other games? They play the Giants. That's a free win. We need them to beat Washington to get Washington out of the way in all likelihood. And then the last week, they play Carolina. Now, Carolina beat them once. Maybe they can do it again. But you knock out Atlanta, now Washington is back in the 7 seed with 10 wins because they have a tiebreaker. So we got to go back to Washington now. We already have them losing 2 games in a row. Who do they play in the final game of the year? It's Dallas. Okay, they could lose that. Dallas isn't playing terribly. Dallas beat them once. So, okay, now we got Seattle back in the 7 seed. We don't have to worry about Tampa Bay here because they won the division. But that's what it takes to get that 7 seed. You need Washington to lose out, and you need Atlanta to get upset by Carolina in week 18. So it's hard to get there. It's just really hard. And if Atlanta somehow manages to win the division, which is unlikely at this point, let's say Atlanta beats Carolina, which is the more likely outcome if you're being realistic, I think overall. Let's look at Tampa Bay. Let's say they lose to let's get it back to the point where Washington is currently in the 7 seed. How do we get that? Okay. Or Atlanta's currently in the 7 seed here. Can Atlanta take the 3rd seed from Tampa Bay? That would be another way this goes. So we need Tampa Bay to lose 1 game. They still have to play the Saints. Probably won't have their quarterback. In week 17, who do the Buccaneers play? Where are they? Oh, they play Carolina, and then they play Dallas this week. If they lose to Dallas, guess what? Tampa Bay owns the tiebreaker over Seattle. They get the 7 seed. They get in. Seattle does not. If they lose to Carolina, same thing. Doesn't really change anything. If they lose in week 18 to the Saints, same thing. Doesn't really change anything. So you need Tampa Bay to lose 2 games. You're probably looking at them losing to Dallas. And then you're looking at them losing to, what's the other one? What's the other more likely one? I wouldn't say the Saints. And to be perfectly honest, I wouldn't say Carolina either. That's probably slightly more likely. Well, now Washington's back in here. You see how hard it is to work this out? So here you would still need Washington to go away, probably because Dallas beats them. Okay, now we're back in. But I had to massage so many different things to get here. And I'm going to say it again. If Seattle wins 10 games this year, which is a reasonable outcome, we're got 8 wins with 3 games left, and they don't make the playoffs, that is unlucky. 10 wins is supposed to be enough to get you in when there are 3 wildcard spots. And I do think that will be a meaningful defense of the season. If we go 10-7, I will consider that to be a fairly successful season, and I will consider not making the playoffs to be somewhat the product of bad luck. That's not to say that we didn't lose games we should have won. We should have beat the Rams the first time. Of course, we should have beaten the Giants. I mean, good Lord. That's not to say that everything that has happened this year is okay. But 10 wins is usually going to get you in. 10 wins is usually going to be a good season. I would not feel that badly about a 10-win year that just didn't quite get you over the finish line. But the reality is, unless you beat the Rams, unless you find a way to top the Rams, 10 wins probably isn't going to do it. Like, the path to a 10-win wildcard spot is very narrow. So that's really all there is. There's really no other way to break this stuff down. I'm not going to get into 3-seed versus 4-seed stuff because who cares, right? Like, who knows if we even want to play the Packers more than the Vikings or the Vikings more than the Packers. We'll get into that later. But right now, all we need to know is There's one realistic path to the playoffs, and it's through the Rams. All right, see you guys later. Go Hawks.